So you need a piece of heavy poster board. Poster board comes in 2 weights, and the more expensive one, like this, was 99 cents. That's what you want. If your poster board's only 30 cents or something, it's probably the thinner. But just so you're aware, it comes in 2 weights. You want the heavy poster board, and then you need a piece of cardstock. You could use a piece of paper, but cardstock's easier because you can kind of use it like a ruler. So you'll need your basic piece to be cut like this. It's an 8.5 by 11, and you can just trace on that. And then next to that, it's another 8.5 by 11. And then you're going to turn it. So I'll put the finished piece here so you can see. So you have 8.5 by 11 next to 8.5 by 11, and then you need an 8.5 by an 8.5 down here. So you have already a line here. So you line this up so it comes in that, and then you trace around there. Okay, so you have 2 rectangles and a square. And then you want to cut it out very carefully, neatly. And then you want to score. Take a dead pen, works really well, or a compass point, the compass you draw circles with. I have, this is just like a dead gel pen. And you want to go like this and make a indentation. You could even use the side of a scissor. If you're real careful, you can just kind of cut it slightly with a scissor or with that X-Acto knife, but you don't want to cut in very far. Like, you just want to make a scratch, so that when you feel it like this, I can tell there's a scratch without looking. Okay, and that's scoring. And then along here, score it. And so when you go to fold, it'll just go nice and neat. It'll just pop right like that perfectly. It's really worth taking the time to score it. And then on the back side, and make sure that when you're scoring, this is the flat side. It's not shiny. Okay, so I'm going to fold it so that the flat side, the not shiny side of my diorama, is on the inside, because it's going to take the paint real well. The shiny side, put on the outside. So you're going to flip it over so the shiny one's over like this, and then you're going to go corner to corner on this one and score, because when you pop up like this in the middle, we're going to tape it, and that's how your diorama is going to fold close like this. It's going to close like that. Okay, so you want to have it scored on the back like that. When you go to make your score lines, you want to make sure this is really square. You want to be kind of neurotic with your measurements here. If I were you, I would measure very carefully down to the 16th of an inch. Measure this. No, it's about 8.5, but it could be a little more or less. I even sometimes put a little mark right on my ruler. It might be, between the 2/16 marks, just like make a little dot, and then make another one down here so that you know that it's exactly square. Like, just check it, even though you traced and it should be square, just check your measurements to make sure that this is perfectly square. It'll just go together a little easier. Now you need to take this pattern piece and put it at the top of this page. Make sure you got the dull side, not the shiny side up. You don't want the shiny side. The flat side is up. And put this piece right along the top edges like this. And trace. And then over here, you can just measure where that hits. Put a line there and go straight across. And this will be your plants up here, and this will be the water, and that's going to be the bottom. So for painting, the next step, you're going to need the various shades of green, maybe a little black, white, some yellow, maybe a little bit of brown. There's no exact color you have to use, just a nice variety of, the colors that occur around a pond, the greens and browns that are around the side of a pond. And I like to use a disposable paper plate as a palette. It's real nice and big, and you just throw it away at the end. And I have, my puddles are a little bit large here. They've been sitting a while and kind of run. But just put a little bit of the different colors in like that. And then you need some various brush sizes, small, medium, large, just some different options so that you can paint some thin little grasses as well as some kind of background things with that. And lastly, it's really nice to have some reference pictures. There's some those reeds that grow along the side there. There's a close-up picture of the rushes with the duckweed. And so if you can take some of your own, if you have a pond nearby, that's great. I'll try to post a few, or you can just go online and type in edge of pond or something and Google image search and come. And lastly, it's really nice to have some reference pictures. There's some those reeds that grow along the side there. There's a close-up picture of the rushes with the duckweed. And so if you can take some of your own, if you have a pond nearby, that's great. I'll try to post a few, or you can just go online and type in edge of pond or something and Google image search and come up with some pictures. So you have a few options on how to do this. What I'm imagining is that this is kind of the foreground, like when you fold it, right, you can see that, you're going to have this be close up because you're going to have your duckweed and stuff right here. And you see how this kind of goes up a little bit. So as you're looking at the right side, you're kind of looking at the pond going out in the distance, sort of, okay? So it's kind of like an oblique view. So this is kind of more far away, and this is up close. It's kind of a tilted view. So you can try to be really artistic. I'll give you a couple tips if you want to try to make this look like it's far away over here, how to paint that. But if the kids just want to just make the grasses in, and not worry about trying to make this perspective, that's okay too. It'll be fine no matter how it's done. They'll enjoy it and it'll be fine. But if you want to be a little bit artsy, especially if you have some older kids in the group interested in art, here's just a few tips on how to accomplish this background. So 3 things you have to really think about when you want something to look up close versus far away. Number 1, you have size. And we all know that things that are closer look larger. Things that are more distant look smaller. Okay, so that's an easy one, size. And second is you have your lights and darks, value. You have your lightest lights and your darkest darks. This is going to be our foreground. So you're going to have your most intense dark greens and your lightest colors also. So sometimes that's surprising to people that you want your darkest darks and your lightest lights here. So as you go over here, if you use white here, if you have a plant that has white flowers, they'll actually be less white over here. They'll be kind of like a light gray or a light blue. So if you have a really deep dark shadow that's almost black over here, that very same shadow over here is going to look kind of more of a gray, not a black. Okay, so your lightest lights and your darkest darks are going to go here. And the third thing is color. The colors up close are going to look more vibrant and more colorful. Greens, really green. Whereas here, your greens are going to be a little less green. And you can see this when you look at a landscape and you see hills going in the distance, and the trees and hills that are very close to you, look green, and as you go away, they get less and less green, and of course the mountains in the distance look kind of like blue, right, hazy blue. We've all seen that, the landscape vista thing. So even in this, even though you're not dealing with a faraway landscape, you can still use that same principle about the colors becoming less colorful. You can still use that on this. So how do we apply? Let me make sure I got it kind of, you can see there. So I recommend doing a couple layers. You have to decide whether you're going to have sky showing here. And if you are, you can just leave it white. That's fine. That'll be just fine. You can paint it a little blue and white here if you want to, but if you want any sky, you'll see a little bit here. And our grasses are only going to come up to about here. You might actually see a little sky peeking in. Over here, this is up close, our grasses, we're only going to see the bottoms of the grasses. You're not even going to see the whole thing. It's going to be more like this, where you see really up close, right? You're just going to see like the top, say, 1 or 2 feet or so of the plants. So if you want to put in kind of an overall background first, just to get so it's not white, okay? You can kind of do a medium green, and we'll paint over this. What you want to do first is paint in, like in here where there's like background, you're going to paint these front things last. But what about behind here? When you're painting the front ones, you don't want to be painting on white. You want to have some kind of green in the background. And often it's good to make this reasonably dark, actually. And I'm going to mix in a little trick is if your greens don't look realistic, if you're like, oh, that green looks like, just like a crayon out of a coloring box, mix a little red in. That'll often improve your greens quite a bit. So I'm going to start out fairly dark and put some light grasses on top. I don't go too dark because I also want my darks to show up. So this is kind of a medium. And then I'm going to go all the way up with this because these are going to be very close up. And as I go to the right, I'm going to be getting further away. Okay, I'm going to be seeing, whoops, I got a little bit on my, I can go back over it when I'm done and patch up the blue there. So I'm going to definitely have all of this be grasses, but then probably only up to like here maybe. And then it'll actually kind of come down somehow. The line doesn't have to look just like this, but so this is the first one, size, right? The reeds are going to get less and less tall. So hopefully even already here, it'll sort of start to look like it's in perspective a little bit, just with the way that it's trailing off like that. It'll actually start fooling your eye already. And I'm just going to leave my sky white. I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so the next layer, like I said, 3 layers is probably what you should shoot for. You can let that dry a little bit, or you can just go ahead and start working on the next one. And for that layer, I used a big flat brush like that. Okay, so use big brushes for big jobs and use little brushes for little jobs. I know it's obvious, but kids often don't do that. So I might want to shift down just a little bit, slightly smaller brush. And I'm going to, look at my picture. I'm going to put in some darks next. Put in some shadowy areas. And I'm going to use a little bit of black or red mixed in with my greens. And remember, over here on the left, where this is our close-up, we want to have our darkest darks here on this side. And also remember, when you're done painting these grasses, if you have Barrel Prismacolor colored pencils, you'll be able to draw more plants on top with the pencils. This dries nice and flat. Make sure you don't use shiny paint. Make sure this is a nice matte finish, regular acrylic paint. Alright, so some of these I'm going to make look like grasses, others just kind of shadow areas. Because if you look at the real pictures, see, there's all this like dark in behind here, and that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish right now. and some of these can look like grasses. All right, and as we go to the right, we're going to get less and less dark. So you may want to use on your palette where I was using my dark from right here, and I just mixed a little white in. Okay, I mixed too much in, so now I want to go back and I want to mix a little bit more of this black in. But you can sometimes just take that same shade that you're using and just add just a tiny bit of white to it to lighten it just a little. Okay, that's still maybe a little bit too. And then if you add a little bit of red, that'll tame the green a little bit, make it look a little less intense. So it's good to get a lot of different shades of green. Now, I think I went on my background here. I think it's a little bit too green even. I think I'm going to go back in and try to make this less intense. It's a nice thing about paint. You can always change your mind, right? You can always just go in and paint over it and say, I don't like that so much. And you can just paint over it. It's never too late to change your mind with paint. Okay, so I'm going to take that back a step. Now, I'm not being real careful about any detail. We're really not doing detail yet here. Remember, this is the behind layer. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see, I hope, on here. Can you see how this is getting less colorful over here? All right, so that helps fool the eye. You don't want greeny greens. You want everything to be more towards gray, more towards the middle. No dark darks, no light lights. Okay, just keep that in mind. Like I said, keep fussing around with it. You can always paint over it. If you look at it and see it doesn't look right, figure out why and go back over it again. The tricky part is going to be in this middle too, where you're it's kind of go halfway between dark and light here. This is your transition zone, so you kind of want to get it kind of gradually blending off. So then your top layer is going to be your most detailed. Oh, also with the larger and smaller, the other thing is that goes along with that is you have more detail here and less detail here. Things are going to be larger, and they're larger so you can see more details. Okay, so you're allowed to put in individual grass blades now, like this. Now remember, over here, this is your close-up. So, sorry for my neighbor's lawn blower going in the background. I apologize. It's leaf time of year, and I'm running out of daylight, and I have to get this recorded, so I'll just say my apology and I'll keep filming. Okay, so you see how you can kind of put the light blades on top of the dark. Now, I'm not being real specific about what kind of plants these are. This is some kind of grass, I guess. So you can see how it was good that we put that dark in, because now putting these light over it, it really looks like it's like thick with grass. And also bear in mind, I said this again, but I will remind, you can go over this and add plants. Once this is dry, you can draw things in on top of here, or you can also go back in, a week later, you want to add something, you want to add another little plant that you just learned about, you can just go in and just paint it there. Now, younger kids will probably have a lot of trouble with this part, with the small brush. So that's why I'm suggesting, especially about going in and finishing with the pencils. The younger kids have a lot easier time controlling the pencils. So over here, you're going to be getting lighter. Like I said, along the crack here, the transition zone, that's going to be the hardest because you're kind of neither. I'm going to make this kind of along the edge here. If you want to add some brown or something and make some like little mud along the edge a little bit, you can do that. And also don't forget, sometimes there's bushes and things along the edges of some ponds. It's best if you can actually look at a picture of a real pond while you're doing it. So here I might want to put in some clumpy little bushes like this. And then save your like white and yellow for last, your lightest things, for where you really want it to stand out. And then you can go in with a yellow or a white. Okay, so that's some kind of a plant coming out there. Some kind of a bushy thing. And we'll just finish up here. You also want to keep a little water dish so you can wet your brush as you're working. If the brush gets too dry, it might be hard to work with the paint. You don't want a lot of water, don't make it sloppy, but just enough to kind of keep it wet. Now over here on the right side, where things are supposed to be far away, I'm not going to want to show a lot of detail. However, you might want to put some, these are cattails or cat o' nines, whatever you call them, reeds. You might want to put those little head things on, and you can do that a little bit. That'll help to make them look far away. Same the tops. I'm doing it in green. You probably want to do it so you have a brownish color. Okay, and a little bit of. And don't forget, you need some going other angles. And then you can also go back in and with the darker again, and then you can make some maybe darker ones going like that. And you can kind of alternate. Put some dark ones in and then do another layer, some light. And then the more layers you put on, the more realistic it'll look, thicker, like it's really a patch of plants. And I still think here on the one I'm doing, I can probably go even a little bit lighter. I'm looking back, but I still have like these really dark areas, and the things over here aren't as dark. And I hope I'm not doing as light here also. I hope you can see well enough. Like I said, work from some pictures. Also, you want to keep your colors cooler. This side can stand to have some like red and yellow and things if you have little red flowers or whatever, but you don't want to use things far away. You're not going to want to use any really much warm. The colors are supposed to look cooler, more bluish. So for example, if I put in, if there was a bluebird or something sitting in here, I'd make it be kind of a grayish bluebird. But if it was sitting up here real close, it would be really intense blue. Okay. So the goal is, when you're done, to have this look close up, and then you're kind of looking out. The curve here helps too. You're kind of looking out further over the pond. So when we make our duck floating right here, it's going to look like it's floating in the middle of the pond, but when we have our frogs here, they're going to look like they're right at the edge. Also, at this stage, before you fold it up and put it together, I suggest doing your background plants. You see how I've got all those pond plants growing on the back, but you can see once it's together like this, it's really hard to get back in there. So I highly recommend putting all your water plants on at this stage. So here you can put a little scientific accuracy in, and you can draw the correct shape of the water plants and make sure some of them stay under the water. Okay, so this kind never comes to the surface. There's others that can grow under or at the surface. Some, like lilies, only their stem is under and the leaves sit at the surface. But some are tolerant of being under the water all the time. So you can do a little research and find out what kind of underwater plants to put in your background. And also when your backdrop is dry, you can go put some of these like arrowhead plants things in. You can use your pencils, and you might want to put some in right along here, right onto the background. And a really high quality colored pencil should go right over this, or you can use paint, either one. But at this point you can also put in some of these kind of really neat looking plants. Then one more painting job you need to do is you take this piece, just ignore the flowers and the frogs, this piece with the lily pads on it, and you want to paint it black. You can put a little green in with the black, or you can paint it black and then let it dry. And then I used a green paint marker for the dots. The paint markers work really, really well. It's much easier than trying to put the dots in with a brush. And then the lily pad, if you can see there, you can paint a little bit around. If you just darken it slightly here, you put some light green here and put a little dark around the edge and blend it, you can actually make it look like this lily pad is underneath this one. Okay, just a little trim detail you can do. So when you go to assemble it, you want to make sure that this is folded so that it's going to kind of fold up like that. Okay, so you can fold it flat. So you want to basically tape it with this kind of thick tape, but if you want to put a little piece just to hold it, use a little thin piece of Scotch tape. Make sure that they're lined up nicely. I kind of like to do it flat like that, and then hold on to it, and then you can kind of pin it. So that helps hold it so it's not flopping around while you're using the big tape. And then get a wide piece, measure it about like that. Whoops. Then you can just trim off this end with scissors. If it goes over, just trim it with scissors. Now when you go to put these on, you might want to check and see the front of these should be as tall as this water up to the grasses, like that. Both of them should be that tall. And what you want to bear in mind is that where you put it here, where do you glue it here? It's the same distance as this up here. So you could even go like this, not including the glue tab, right? Fold the glue tab down, put it down like this, and then put a little pencil mark right there. And then you'll know how far out. And the same thing with here, if you want to know, well, in here you're going to glue it to the grasses, but when you get over here, all right, you want to know where to glue here, you can just measure like this, put a little line there, and then you're going to know where. Make sure when you glue to use a really good white glue. Don't use school glue. I don't think school glue will be quite sticky enough. So use it says now stronger formula on there. That's good. And then use plenty of glue on the tab here and here. It doesn't matter what you glue first. And you'll want to make sure that it doesn't go over this crease line. You know, keep it in about an inch, a couple centimeters like that. And then you're going to glue your lily pad piece with the duckweed on top of here when you're done. And then this one over here, same thing, come in. Make sure that this piece doesn't cross this fold line. Okay, and then your duck will go, or maybe you have the duck already in place right here. But don't glue this one up by the water here like you did on this one. Okay, don't glue it there because it's supposed to be down a little bit, because then this is like out in the water. It's not right next to the shore. Okay. And lastly, if you want to add some extra things behind here, you know, fish, you can glue fish and the grebe right to the background too. You can glue things right to here. But if you want to add any in or behind, you can add something up here if you want. You could make a little pop-up back here and add a dragonfly, or you can make a pop-up here and add a bird fly. And you can add these little pop-ups anywhere you want to. All you need to do is just make sure that when you look at them from the side, the rectangle is nice and even. The space here is the same as the space here, and this strip here is the same space as this. Just make sure that the rectangle looks nice and as perfect as you can get it. And then if it's not completely perfect, when you fold it up, if the crease adjusts a little bit, it'll be fine. And let's see, one other thing. I did not put pop-up tab supports going back to here. If you want the flower to be up, automatically pop up perfectly every time, you'd have to run a support back like this. You just make sure that the support is parallel to this edge, you know. But I thought basically, you know, the kids are going to get it out and have it out and look at it for a while, fold it up, put it in their portfolio. They're not going to be opening it all the time like they would a pop-up book that they're reading a lot. So this is probably adequate just to put like the little frog there, just putting a tab like that. So they'll, if you have it folded like this for a while and then you get it out, you may need to adjust and pull these up a little bit, but that probably won't really bother the kids. It's not worth with all the hassle putting in a support. So you can see in here, I wanted to see my fish, so I cut a hole. That's kind of tricky. I don't really recommend that. I just kind of realized I couldn't see my fish. But you need a little adult help. Take an X-Acto knife and do that. But like I said, I don't recommend that. So you can customize it, and you can add as many little pop-ups as you want. In mine, I don't even have a dragonfly in here. So if you want to do that, you can put one perched, or you could put one you know, sitting here or whatever. So go ahead and add anything you want to, customize it, and have it be a real showpiece for what you've learned about ponds.